Welcome to our public seminar discussion with the topic of course, advancing technology, innovation, sustainable business, and digitalization in the Asian region, Gotong Royong in the US perspective. This program is made possible with the collaboration between American Corner Yogyakarta, GEICA, and the US Embassy of Jakarta. Okay, today I am Abdillah Gibran Bayhadi, but please call me Gibran. Today I will be the moderator of this very fine event, but before we get into the main event and presentation, let me introduce our very important speaker today. Anup Mahajan is a regional public engagement specialist. He joined the Foreign Service in September 2023, and his first tour was in Washington, D.C. Of course, he's a very people person who is very active and a very kind person. There will be a Q&A session, and we heavily advise you to ask questions and discuss a lot of topics with Anup because he is very open to discussions. But of course, I will not talk too long. Who else is better to introduce themselves than the man of the hour himself, Anup Mahajan? Please, time and place is yours.
Is this? Okay. And oh, there we go. See, as you can see, even though I have technology in my title, I'm not skilled at technology at all. So thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank all of you for being here today. You could be so many other places, but you're choosing to be here and to listen to me. So I take that as personal gratitude. Thank you so much. Yeah, so, you know, as Gibran mentioned, I am Regional Public Engagement Specialist. It's just a fancy title for a US diplomat. I have the honor and privilege of representing my country, the United States, abroad. And I really deeply enjoy my, my assignment here in Indonesia. So a little bit about me, as you can tell, I do not speak a lot of Bahasa Indonesia. I only learned 8 weeks of it, so the only word I know is sedikit. I use that often. So thank you for bearing with me in English. I have been here since May of 2025, and so it's been a whirlwind kind of 9 months. But in that time, I have the privilege of meeting hundreds, if not, I think I've probably met thousands at this point, of young people like you across not only Indonesia, but across the ASEAN region. So what I do is my fancy little title there, Regional Public Engagement Specialist, is just another word for the fact that I cover the American spaces. And so the American Corner that we have in Yogyakarta at UMY, thank you UMY. Who are the UMY students here? Clap. Clap. Who's from UMY here? Thank you very much. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Be proud of your American Corner. Come on. We have 8 corners like the one at UMY all across Indonesia. And then I also cover the American spaces, American corners in Malaysia, Philippines, and Timor-Leste as well. So I cover the entire region. And so I say that because my talk today kind of sets the stage for a regional kind of focus, right? So it applies to you here in Indonesia, it applies to youth in Malaysia, it applies to youth in Timor-Leste. And the one thing I want you to take away from all of that is that you may live and be from Indonesia, or you may think you have career dreams to work here in Indonesia, or you may move, life's gonna take you in different places. But the one thing I can tell you, there are 2 things I can tell you, and I think some of the UMY students heard me say this yesterday, but I'll share it with all of you again, is that you cannot predict how your career is gonna turn out, right? You cannot predict. That's one truth from the old man up here. 2, another truth is you're living in a rapidly changing time, right? And so this fancy title here, there are a lot of fancy words in there. It's just another way of me that's gonna be talking to you today. Our discussion is gonna be about what I see and what the US government sees as the skills necessary for young people to become future leaders. And that's what we do in American Corners. And that's what we do in all of our American spaces. So we have over 700 American spaces all around the world. And we're in almost every country, every continent, minus a few, minus Antarctica, not yet. And so and why do we do that, right? Why is the US government investing in an American Corner in Yogyakarta? Why am I here? Why does my position even exist, right? Why do we have American spaces? You must be wondering, who is this dude and why is he here? And why is he talking to us? Well, it's because we care a lot about investing in the future leaders of ASEAN region, right? And so a big key to that, a big key to understanding people-to-people ties and forging greater bilateral relations between the US and Indonesia are things like this. It's just interaction, it's dialogue, it's putting a diplomat in front of you and telling you, me explaining to you, where's our common ground, right? Where do we meet halfway? And how do I help to unlock opportunities and potential for you in ways that you probably don't see yet, right? And so a big part of that is at the heart of what we do in diplomacy and also what we do at the US mission. I'm based in Jakarta, in the US Embassy in Jakarta, but so I travel all the time. I'm here today. This afternoon, we're heading to Semarang for another American corner. And then next week, I go to Timor-Leste. 2 weeks after that, I go to the US. Then I go to the Philippines, and I go to Malaysia. So I travel all the time. But at the heart of it is this kind of engagement. So wherever I go, I want to make sure that I talk to young people like you because the world you're living in is challenging. It's changing. You have a lot of technology. You have a lot of information. You have AI. And so how do we make sense of that, right? So today's talk is just going to be, it's informal. It's just a discussion. And it's just my, it's my way of sharing with you. Let's look at it for the bigger picture, right? So you hear all these things. You're in school. A lot of you are students, right? And you're here, you're learning your disciplines. You may study international relations, or somebody's learning pharmacy. Other people are learning English education. But the one thing that combines all of these is that there's a certain core skill set. So I'm going to have us go to our slide here. So I know this is small, but I came across this. So this is data from the World Economic Forum that's held in, sorry about that, that's held in Davos, Switzerland. And every year, the World Economic Forum puts out a study. And in this, and I'm sorry, I'm blocking some people. Okay, I'm going to walk over here. The World Economic Forum. And so what they do is they interviewed over 1,000 companies, large, small, medium, big names, small names, you name it, right? And what this represents, and let me just carefully get my notes here, is what are the core skills that companies think are going to be useful for the next generation, right? So what I want you to do is look, if you look at the left to right axis, the one on the bottom there, and that's how many employers think a skill is important right now in 2025, right? So some of the things that you see, so I'll just sit so that I'll remain out of your way. So some of the things you see in that are manual dexterity over here, reading, writing, mathematics, not a lot over here, but there's resource management, operations, service orientation. This will all make sense in a second. And then on the top bottom axis here, the y-axis, is how many employers expect that skill to become more important by the year 2030. So some of the things, you see a lot of clusters here in what's called the out-of-focus skills. Up there is networks and cybersecurity, environmental stewardship. So what I want you to know is that when you look at the top right axis, right, the top right box, those are skills that are very important now and are getting more important. So some of these skills are AI and big data, right? Technological literacy, curiosity and lifelong learning, creative thinking, resilience and flexibility, leadership. So you start to see a familiar theme, right? And then on the bottom left, it's opposite, right over here, are out of focus skills, right? So what these mean are they're less important now and they're not really growing. So in these skills here, you see marketing and media, multilingualism, quality control, programming, reading, writing, mathematics, manual dexterity, endurance, and precision. Some of you might be surprised, right? I see some nodding heads. You're surprised to hear some of those skills that are called out of focus. Why do we think that is?
Well, I think that a lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of people has already
Yeah.
mastered these skills.
Right.
So there's a lack of there's not a lot of people who needs these because there's a lot of people who can do this already.
Right, and that's exactly correct. And one of the things I'll point out to you is something like reading, writing, and mathematics, right? You think, we grow up, right? And we hear our parents say like, you gotta know your math. And yeah, these are fundamental skills, right? To learn how to write, to read, and to do math. Those are like foundational skills, right? But the reason they're out of focus skills is because that alone is not in demand anymore, right? Companies know that you're gonna come to them and you're gonna have those skills. And the reason they're in this box and not the upper right box is because if you look, AI and big data, technological literacy, like things like AI and big data are doing the reading, writing, and mathematics for you, right? AI can also take care of quality control. It can chug out marketing and media, right? Those are like basic skills that now technology is starting to take over, right? But when you look at the upper right quadrant, right, there are things there that AI can't do, right? So, for example, creative thinking, leadership and social influence, analytical thinking, right? And these are things that, it bears repeating that, this may not be rocket science, and you may be like, oh, that's intuitive. But that's why I wanted to show this chart, because this is real data. This is over 1,000 multinational companies that are validating what we think, right? That these skills are irreplaceable. Skills like creative thinking, problem solving, relating to others, right? And so that's really what I want to tell you about, is that no matter where you are in the world, whether you grow up in the United States, whether you grow up in Malaysia, in Indonesia, or Philippines, you're in a region where issues are starting to become bigger, right? And so this kind of skills that you see in that upper right that are in demand, right, those are the kinds of skills you're gonna need to solve the bigger problems that we see in the ASEAN region, right? So this is where the Gotong Royong comes in, right? So I didn't know about that until I came to Indonesia, And this was a fascinating topic for me because I was like, wow, like as an American, so I grew up, I was born and raised in the US, but I grew up in an Indian household, right? So I have the Asian upbringing and the Asian values that are similar to yours, but I'm an American, right? And so I grew up, I'm a product of America, right? And so I had those two perspectives, right? And the interesting thing about that is, I think it wasn't a big leap for me to understand that collectivism and collaborating and doing things together is a big deal here, because that's a very Asian mentality, right? I get that. But then the American side of me is like, we are a product and our employers are a product of, go big, go it alone, and, break things fast and disrupt markets and do all those things, right? Which are like the startup sector, right? And so it seemingly is very opposing. But when you think about the kinds of problems and the kinds of issues that face the future of this region that I see, working day in and day out as a diplomat in the US mission, things like climate change, right? Things like maritime security, things like cybersecurity. These are like big issues that that require systems thinking, right? So these are cross-sectoral issues, right? So something like maritime security. Does somebody want to describe to me what maritime security is? I know, a really fun topic for an afternoon, right? Somebody? No? Okay, so I'll give you my boring diplomat answer then. So maritime security is about securing the sovereignty of the seas, right? And so every nation has a stake in a particular region surrounding water that's shared, right? Very basic understanding, right? So one might think that that's just a geographical issue, right? Your country happens to border on a body of water, fine, yeah, big deal. But that issue is more complex, right? It's not just about geography. It's not just about where a country is located and what body of water it happens to border, but it's also access to trade routes, right? It's access to resources. It's even landlocked countries have a stake in maritime security, right? Because how are they going to get their goods imported and exported, right? So when you begin to widen the scope of just one issue like that, it requires a different way of thinking, right? Let's take another issue, AI. That's a cross-sectoral issue, right? At its heart, it's just tech. But when you think about it, and increasingly when you enter the job market, it's going to be far larger than that. You're talking about ethics, you're talking about responsible governance, you're talking about government to government relations. I mean, so much of what we do, I never would have thought, and I said this yesterday to some UMY students, that, I never would have thought that I would be using AI so much as a diplomat, right? I'm in the business of like talking to people, helping people understand finding mutual ground, right? Where is that middle ground? The thought of me having to use AI is so, like 10 years ago, I would have been like, you're crazy, right? But increasingly, I'm using it to help me think about issues that I wouldn't necessarily think about in a certain way, right? And so again, this is what we mean in the US government by systems thinking, right? You want to, increasingly, success for all of you is going to look like, no matter what discipline you're in, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's going to be your ability to synthesize information across several different perspectives. And that's why that's why that upper right quadrant is important, because the sum total of all these skills together gives you the ability to look at any issue in multiple different ways. That's the big takeaway. So gone are the days where you just want to focus on certain skills, right? Everyone's going to have a degree. Everyone's going to have the same knowledge base that you do when you apply for an employer, when you seek out a different opportunity. But not everyone's going to think like you. That's the big difference. So that's sort of the crux of what I wanted to say, which is that, the advantage that you all have, and this is where your culture comes in, right? You have the added advantage of those skills, the combination of skills of systems thinking and thinking about issues not in just one perspective, but sort of cross-sectorally, is built into your culture, right? Your culture of Gotong Royong and looking at issues in a collective way is actually built into your perspective. So my advice to you and my observation to you as an American diplomat is you have so much at your fingertips, and you have an added advantage of having that cultural understanding of looking at things in a collaborative way that doesn't always come easy to people who grew up in the West, right? We're not taught. When I was in high school and junior high school, even as young as elementary school, right? I was taught to speak up and go against the grain and be individualistic. But yet when I was at home, my parents, being Indian, were like, no, you're not going to stand out. What are you talking about? They're like, put your head down and study and don't don't be different and whatever. And I was like, so but so it's interesting to me because you come from the opposite side of that, right? But increasingly, the world you're living in is going to require skills that you have to collaborate and work with and think differently. And one other thing I'll say is that I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be doing what I do today, if I had to predict. And so just be open. Be open to failure, be open to opportunity, because those things are what are going to get you far. I mean, I will say, that all of these skills are important, right? But what's surprising is that you know, if you look at the sum total of skills that are in demand by employers, it's not what's on your paper. Your resumes matter to a certain degree, but it doesn't take you all the way. And I can say that even with my career, which started when the internet was just born, so I'm dating myself. But so, you know, my career has started right at the late 90s, and then, you know, it's evolved, right? And I can say, you know, a resume mattered more when I graduated my undergraduate years, you know, at the beginning of the millennium. And then now, like, you know, having been on the side of an on the side of an interviewee and then interviewer, you know, what makes you you is unique, and that's what people want to see. So I'm going to stop there, and let's open it up for discussion and
Thank you so much.
Yeah, collaboration.
Let's give a great round of applause for Anup Mahajan for this amazing presentation. We didn't know it yet before, but now we do know that Gotong Royong, something that is deep in our culture, and it turns out to be a huge advantage for us in the international terms of core skills in 2030. Now, of course, we do have a list of questions here.
Yes.
This is from the attendees who gave questions in their Google form and their
Yes. Okay.
First things first, let's tackle two questions and then give it to the audience.
Sure.
First, Gotong Royong emphasizes collective benefit, while many US business models are highly market-driven. This is as far as the attendee knows. Of course, if you have any corrections, please. How do these two approaches be aligned in real partnerships without one overshadowing the other?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, let me think here. So I think, you know, the answer to that question is what companies and what big organizations are starting to realize, right? That to be successful in the market, you have to be inclusive in your thinking, right? So when you think about the big brands, right? When you think about something like a big company like Apple, for example, you know, yes, they have a very market-driven strategy of profit and making more products and selling more products, but they've had to also adapt to a very different landscape, right? And there are countries in the world that are primarily a Google-based market, right? Android-based market. So they've had to adapt, right? And it's sort of like, how do you market? And there is a fantastic example of marketing to very large countries where Apple doesn't even like infiltrate the populace, right? So like I can look at India, for example, or you look at China, what they've done recently in China. These are huge markets that are Android markets, but yet they found ways to do inclusive marketing and ways to think and relate their products and services to a different, interculturally adapt, right? And so that's just one example. You take another example of a big American company like IBM, for example, right? How they have had to, and that, you know, for a lot of you, I think, you know, you probably, well, you weren't born when IBM was a big deal, right? You probably don't even hear much about IBM anymore, but IBM was the company that started personal computers, right? They were the ones who really, it was like Apple and IBM who were the big drivers of the personal computing market, right? In the 80s and 70s and 80s. And you look at profit wasn't, you know, the market-driven strategy of IBM wasn't enough to keep it alive, right? Because other things change, right? And they didn't adapt to what the reality was of the market. And what do you need to adapt? Now you all know you need that top right quadrant, right? And so I think the answer lies, it's big companies are starting to realize that. Big organizations, no matter what, whether they're in the for-profit or non-profit, are realizing that there are more and more collective solutions to things. And even though we live in a very unpredictable world right now, it's going to take communal solutions to solve complex problems.
That's great, especially adding the fact that because of the internet, the world is very open right now.
Yes.
Even me, an Indonesian, can speak to you from America.
Exactly.
We can talk to each other. This is part of why collectivity is very important in today's world, right?
Right.
So next question. This is something that we all can relate to. Well, the students. If your personal opinion, if if you were a college student, again, today, preparing for the 2030 workforce, what would you focus on learning differently?
I probably wouldn't have focused so much on trying to learn all the ins and outs of my technical skill. So I started out thinking that I was going to be a pre-medical student. I was thinking I was going to be a doctor, like every other Asian on the planet. And then I realized, you know what, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And so then I enjoyed finance and economics. And so then I did that. And then I went all in. I was like, I'm going to learn everything I need to know about finance and international development and, you know, all well and good. But it wasn't until I had the experiences of actually taking my knowledge and living in another country and volunteering or actually like working on international projects at that young age that I realized, oh my God, yes, I want to do this or I want to take my career this way. It wasn't learning how to solve the little economic problems that I was like learning about in my class and everything. That was important. It gave me a foundational skill set, but that wasn't enough, right? What propelled my career were things like, you know what, I'm going to take a leap. I'm going to be bold and I don't know how I'm going to do in this particular job, but I'm going to do it anyway. Or, you know what, I don't have the ability to live and work in Europe, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that's what I did, right? And I went and I learned it and I was like, okay, you know, so I think looking back, I wish I had done more of that, done more of the outside of my classroom, outside of my studies. What am I going to do to enrich and further my career, to give me an insight into the future of what I'm going to do, if that makes sense.
Makes perfectly sense. Perfect sense. Of course, we all need to try and do more than what we learn in our classroom. Right. So, well, a little quick question. Sorry. Now, after the questions listed in our Google form, of course, we will open the Q&A session for everyone in the audience here, whether you want to ask about international topics, about the core skills of 2030, or about anything about America. Please, the time and place is yours. Just raise your hand, ask the question. Mau pakai bahasa Indonesia, tidak apa-apa, akan saya bantu dan teman-teman kita bantu juga. Of course, if you need any translations, we can help with that too. Oh, yes.
Thank you, Imran. Hi.
Hi.
It was a really interesting topic when we talk about the core skills for 2030. I've been dealing with this student drug development for the past 6 years.
Yep.
And one of my jobs is actually to give the career awareness. And also to do a tracer study of those who have been graduating from the university after 1 year. And it turns out, I can say that not more than 60% of the alumni have the jobs that is similar to their study background when they're studying at the undergraduate.
Right.
So you see, when I saw this core skill in 2030, it makes me speechless because it turned out that teaching and mentoring is now our focus skills, and then the one that is on the right corner is the one that now we're heading to. Yeah.
Right.
So to me, it's really stressful to handle the situations where I have to deal with the students who probably they have the dilemma with their parents. The parents want them to become a, say, civil servant, and they don't want to be those workers. And we have these skills that we need to teach them as well.
Right.
And the fact that the data in my university says that less than 60% students meet the actual job, which has the same as their study background. So, what can you advise me for this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wish I had. Wow. Well, you know, I think part of it is, you know, it's a challenge, right? Because something like this, like this kind of data, right? Here, I'll sit back down. Data like this challenges our acceptable notions of what, it challenges what education is, right? And this is a big debate that we have to have. We're having it in the United States, I think all over the world, we're probably having this, but I think more in the United States, we are constantly debating what is the value of our education system, right? And it's interesting, right? Like I'll just say, when I was growing up in elementary school, high school, and then college, it was acceptable, right? Like, excuse me, we didn't even think twice about, success in your professional career, no matter what it was. You had to go to college, right? It was like that was just what was accepted. No matter what your ethnic background was or whatever, whether you were, Asian, Latino, what you name it. And so, but now, it's interesting. I don't know about Indonesia, but at least in the United States, it's no longer, a 4-year college degree doesn't fit everybody. And, careers now are starting to take different forms, right? And a lot of these skills, like AI and big data, technological literacy, you can learn without a degree, right? So what is the value of a degree? And so this is my take, and I'm not saying this is the right answer, but my take is that, nothing is ever going to eliminate the benefit and the need for education, right? You need a foundation, right? Because that's what society runs on. Of course, you have to go to school, you have to learn the basics of your profession. But really, that's not going to be enough anymore. And so what I think is, and this is where I think it comes harder to cultures where it's maybe not the American mindset, right? Of like, we have it baked into our culture to like take risks, go out and like, do what it is you're going to do, fail and then try something else. But that's not the way it is in this part of the world, right? So I think my advice to those of you who advise other people, or like, if you're grappling with these questions, is take small, what I like to call micro risks, right? In whatever way you can, right? If it means taking a course that, that always interested you, like there's a subject that interests you, take it. Take the course if you can, and see what it does. See what it does for you. Or volunteer. We talked about volunteering a lot yesterday. Volunteer for something in a field where it's low stakes, right? You're not gonna risk much by doing that. I think it's important because you're gonna know what skills you're good at, and your passions, right? And at the end of the day, no one else can tell you what you're good at other than you, right? But so I think, it's a fine line, right? You don't want to go against authority, but you also want to exert your own path. And so I think take small steps to nourish and nurture the interests that you have, because otherwise you're never gonna know, right? And so I think that's what I'll say about that.
Of course. Is that all? That's great. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? Now, Anup, I will stand up. You don't have to stand up.
Okay.
You can do so as what you're most comfortable with.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions to give to Anup right here today? First.
Okay, thank you. Before that, allow me to ask in Indonesian.
Sure.
Jika bisa memilih salah satu dari skill yang ada di PowerPoint ini yang sudah dijelaskan tadi, apa skill yang paling dibutuhkan yang Bapak pilih, benar-benar satu skill, dan bagaimana caranya untuk memaksimalkan skill tersebut? Terima kasih.
So the question was, if there was one single skill inside this chart that you can choose, which will it be? And how do you maximize it? For example, if you choose AI and big data, maybe. Well, what do you think?
If there was one skill that I thought that I would like to focus on?
Yeah, you think it's most important in the future?
That's important to me I think, that's an easy one. It's going to be, there's a pink dot there, you probably all can't see it, but it's called curiosity and lifelong learning. That's the most important. And I can tell you, that's the reason I'm sitting on this couch today doing something I never would have thought, because, it takes the curiosity and and that's when, I connected to the ASEAN issues, the more kind of like regional issues that I was talking about, that more and more in this region, it's that kind of skill set that's going to take the leadership that's required for the countries in this region. And I think it's curiosity and lifelong learning and learning how to adapt right? I think adaptability is another one. I think it's probably included in lifelong learning, but you know, being able to adapt, right? And you know, that's going to be the most important thing.
Part of the question was also, how would you maximize this scale? So how would you maximize curiosity and lifelong learning in your opinion?
Oh my gosh. So how would I maximize that? Well, I'm okay. Now that my nerdy side is gonna come out, I read a lot. So I like to read. Boring, I know. I like to. I'm really like, you know. I think this is where technology really provides you with that, right? Because you have so much information at your fingertips. So, and I know we're told not to scroll on our phone and all that stuff, but you can scroll wisely, right? So instead of like scrolling through social media for hours, read something. Read something on your phone, right? Read the newspapers, read other newspapers. That's what I did. You know, read like knowledgeable things rather than just like consuming empty data, right? And I don't mean to knock social media. I know you all love it, but you know, but do something more constructive, right? That can be constructive too, but now the old man's telling you on the couch, like, read something too, right? For every hour you spend on social media, spend 2 hours reading something. Please, please do that. Yeah.
Of course, so the most important skill was curiosity and lifelong learning, and read. Just
read.
Read every time.
Read.
It's also very true for students like us. I think every single lecturer also says the same thing, just read. That's
read.
What they say,
yeah.
So, anybody else have any questions for Anup? Wow, that's great. Okay, let's start from here.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, if we see this tables, all the skills, I think the certificate degree is not really matter because in our school, in our college, we don't learn such kind like that, such kind of skills. Because I don't know in the United States. What I want to know is that how the company recruit, you know, the employee if they really want that kind of skills. Because certificate degree just works.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a great question. So, and this is how we recruit in the government too, is that, you know, more and more to see those skills, it's, you have to, you know, there are different ways that people are going about it, right? So, but the one common thing is competency-based interviewing. So increasingly, you're gonna see a lot of organizations and a lot of, even Western companies, sort of like evaluating how you think and how you, what your process is to analyze. So it'll be questions like, it's not going to be questions like, let's say you're applying for a job in IT, right? In information technology. It's not going to be in the interview, let's say you're in an interview in the United States with a US company. That rarely is a question going to be, how would you code to solve this bug, right? That's a technical. What got you in the door to the interview is already your technical skill. You wouldn't be there if they knew, if they thought you didn't know how to code, right? Or to debug something. So instead, what they're going to ask you is maybe nothing to do about IT. They're going to say like, okay, let's say 5 years from now, you're on my team and you're managing a team of 3 other people. You have 1 difficult employee. What are you going to do? How would you solve that issue? So then they're seeing, how are you gonna, what's your adaptability like, right? How do you relate to other employees? Or they're gonna ask you, tell me about a time. A lot of these questions start with tell me about a time, right? Tell me about a time when you started a project and you failed. Tell us about it. And so they know that's a really uncomfortable question. We're always taught to like not talk about it, but they wanna see how you think. And so again, they're looking at those skills there, right? So it's these kinds of questions that 9 times out of 10, that's going to be an interview for you in the West. I don't know what it's like here. I mean, so what do big companies, does anyone know? Like what do companies ask here? Is it similar? This is just an open question. I'm curious. Or maybe those skills aren't, you mean, you know, my stereotype, or I don't want to say stereotype, my assumption is that there's more of a premium on technical knowledge here, right? And I think that tends to be what we think of in the West as like, okay, you know, like they're going to test you on your like technical skills here, but less on the human skills. But if you interview in an American company, they're going to ask you all those kinds of questions. Tell me about a time when, tell me about a difficult employee, tell me about a challenging time, or this is a certain issue that you have to solve it, walk us through your process. So.
Well, okay. Well, I wanted to say a few words here. When I was trying to get into a community or an organization, there was also an interview process, and it was actually similar to what you said. This also applies in the American border, actually.
Yeah.
What they asked was not my ability to like sort books, you know, or
right.
like that.
Yeah, they don't care about that. Yeah.
Everybody can do that.
Yeah.
Practically everybody
Yeah.
can do that. But
Right.
what they asked me was about my most inspirational moment.
Right.
Or like, you know, how do you overcome failure?
Right.
So,
Right.
like what you said, technical skills, it's not just what
Yes.
you need beyond that.
Yes.
Social skills especially.
Yeah. And my number one answer to your question too, and I know you didn't ask this, but if I could stress to all of you, is be you and be different. Don't be like everybody else, right? And you're gonna hear that a lot. Everyone tells you to fit right in and but like do not do that. Be yourself, because each of you are unique and you bring a different mindset to how your experiences are and what you bring to the table. And so employers want to see that. They don't care. They don't care that you can do calculus. They don't care that you can debug like 20 different programs. Everyone can do that. Everyone's going to be able to do that. I guarantee you. You live in a very competitive world, so be different. Be you, bring your personality, bring your thoughts. Every one of you is unique. Every one of you can succeed in any organization, but everyone can study the same things you do, right? That doesn't differentiate you. And that's a very American thing, but that's what we're proud of. For, you know, you have to bring your individuality, because that's what's going to set you apart, right? And then once you're in the door, then you play nice. Then play in the sandbox, and then all these skills matter. But like, you have to be yourself. So don't blend in. Yeah. So
don't blend in, stand
don't
out.
blend in, stand out.
Of course, I saw another question here from the person over there. Who was it? Okay.
So thank you very much
Yes.
for sharing about that. So I learned a lot from you about the whole scale. So my question is, so you travel and meet with like many youths, right? So what is the common challenge that you in ASEAN are facing, and how the United States like diplomat like you and the other like international organization are helping?
Oh wow, that's a great question. That's a topic for a whole other talk. But what I'll say is, I think, let's see. Okay, it's going to be twofold. So one is, I think one of the biggest issues that the countries in this region face is around AI, and this is not, you know, this is not unique to this, but the economies in this region are so heavily digitized, right? I mean, you think about Southeast Asian economies and even East Asian economies, right? So the AI governance piece is going to be huge, because AI is increasingly influencing so many different sectors of life, right? From politics, elections, to climate change, to information, how information is received and analyzed. So the governance issue is going to be big, and that's even bigger for when you all reach reach your age for employment, right? Because by then, in the next, 10, 15, 20 years, when you're at your prime and you're up here giving a talk, these are the issues that, because AI is going to be that much more developed, right? So that's one. I think the other big issue is, and kind of this is a good segue actually to American Corners, is how are we going to take the massive supply that you have in terms of young people. You have the countries in this region are each densely populated. You have a large number of young people like yourself from 18 to 35 who are heavily skilled, who have a lot of knowledge, a lot of ability, but not enough opportunities, right? So the challenge is going to be for all of you being the leaders of the next, of your own countries and your own region, is that how are you going to create like opportunities for an inclusive economy? So how are you going to create as leaders, and you should think about this actually. This is actually a good question for all of you. Thinking about it now, if you have influence in the next 20, 30 years, you're going to be leading, you want to be leading in whatever you're doing, how would you as a leader give and create opportunities for your fellow countrymen and your fellow citizens to have the skills that they need to thrive in the global economy? And if you can solve that, that's going to be a big thing, right? Because what we do, and that's why it kind of ties back to why are we here? Why does the US government care? Why do we have a corner in Jogja, right? Because all of our American spaces, what we do is we do a lot of upskilling that way. And so we are a platform where we provide hands-on skills and skills-based training and opportunities and exposure to people, tech ecosystems where you can try out different things, right? You can walk into a corner, you can walk into an American center and engage with skills and ecosystems that you wouldn't necessarily have in your daily life, right? And so it's those kinds of things that are going to be important for ASEAN. I mean, to lead effectively in ASEAN is this, because you have, let's just take Indonesia, right? You have such a large, diverse population. It's the 4th largest country in the world, right? You have an enormous population, enormous disparities between rural and urban citizens. So how are you going to connect? How do you, this is going to be a huge problem, right? Or I don't want to say problem, challenge is how are you going to connect rural youth, people your age out in rural communities, how are you going to connect them to the increasingly digital economy that we live in, right? There's such a big divide, right? And that's going to be unique. It's not unique to Indonesia, but I mean, it's, those are the kinds of questions that are going to be important.
That's great. So, does anyone else have any questions for Anup? This is a very open discussion. For those who have asked, you can also ask another question. Okay.
Stand.
Hello, thank
Hi.
you so much for your great
Yes, no problem.
As you mentioned, as we can see from that, one of the skills is working with others.
Yep.
So that's on the top 4 as you can see. And as you mentioned earlier, you travel a lot. You've been to Philippines, and on Monday you will go to Timor Leste. Do you what do you think about the most effective strategy for communicate with others?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think, I'll take it personally, and then, I think listening, okay, this is going to sound really basic, right? And you're going to be like, why, but I think listening goes a long way, right? And I think, I wouldn't be so much of what I do that makes me effective in my job day to day as a diplomat is just to be able to listen. And I think, even, and especially more so when you come from other cultures, right? So when I'm in which for my career, I'm always going to be in a different country. I'm out of my element, right? Like home is where I make home. That's the beauty of my career, but it's also the challenge, right? Because I'm always going to be an outsider wherever I am. And I think the one thing that makes me feel comfortable is to relate better, right? Because I have to do that as my job anyway, but also just as a human being, when I'm not at work, I'm still not at home. I'm not in the US. It's not my culture. It's not my country. But I have to listen, right? You have to be empathetic, right? So it's it's that active listening and empathy that personally and professionally are what are going to get you really far. Because at the end of the day, so much about being in other cultures, and even for all of you, right? If you don't have to be diplomats to work with other people from other countries, right? There's so much diversity in this room, right? So no matter what you choose to do, the reality is the way the workforce is going, the global workforce is you could be based here in Yogyakarta working out of your living room, teleworking with somebody in Hong Kong and somebody in Seattle, Washington, and somebody in London, right? That could be your team of the future, right? So there you go. It's a multilingual, multicultural team, and but you're still at home, right? But what the key is, whether you live in these countries or whether you're going to travel to these countries or you're still sitting in your living room in Yogyakarta, teleworking with a multilingual team, you're still going to have to listen. You're going to have to understand their perspectives. And I think that's what makes me effective in my job, because there's no wherever I go, I don't have all the answers, right? So, like, I'm going for the first time to Timor-Leste next week, and I've never been, right? I mean, I know what I do. I know American Spaces. I know what we offer, but like, I have to listen to understand what are their interests, what are their motivations, right? What do they want out of this relationship? Same thing when I go to Malaysia, Philippines, or even parts of Indonesia, right? I'm not the expert, but I can, if I listen, and I can understand where they're coming from and their perspectives, I can then offer solutions. And I think that's going to be important.
Of course,
great question.
It's very important.
Yes,
we
yes.
all need to do it.
We all need to do it. We all need to do it.
In every single
Yes.
part of life, I think listening
Yes.
should be something
Definitely.
to practice, right?
Definitely.
The Q&A is still open, yes?
Okay. First of all, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
And actually, I just found your LinkedIn.
Oh.
And I
Oh, boy.
see your experience there.
Yeah.
And actually, because you have been you have been in the business development and management consulting for several years. If you are gonna do it now, if you are now a young person just like us, what are you gonna do different in this era? Maybe when you are entering management consulting and business development. Thank you.
Oh boy, wow, look at that. Bonus points for finding me on LinkedIn. So if I could restate, so your question was basically, if looking back, like what could I have done differently, but doing the same opportunities, or yeah, okay. So here's the thing, right? I view my career as a journey. And so, when I look back over the past 25, 30 years of my working life, each one, sometimes, I'm like, wow, I did all of that, and it seemingly didn't make sense when I was doing it, right? I would go from, different stage to different stage, different career, and I look back. But it all tends to make sense because one of the things that drives it forward is there's a commonality, right? And I think, one of the things that drove me from, like, if I compare just what you were saying, right? Like business development and consulting, what I loved about that was it was at the heart of that is people to people. So it's just in a corporate setting, right? So like in business development, what you do, at least in the US, is you're strategizing how to grow a business, right? And you're strategizing what are the optimal ways to like grow your organization through partnerships, through marketing, through outreach, through development, through, and so it's not very dissimilar to what I do here, right? Like what I do here now as a diplomat is growing the influence and relationship of the United States in partnership with other countries. So you begin to see the similarity, right? And so then when I look back, I'm like, wow, you know what? This actually all does make sense, right? Because I'm like, at the end of the day, what drives me is like creating those relationships, helping people understand, right? And so you begin to see that arc in my career, right? And so what I'd say to all of you is it doesn't have to make sense as you're going through it, right? You follow your dreams, you follow what you're good at, you follow what your heart wants to do, and then don't worry about what's in don't worry about making sense, right? Don't worry about what's right or wrong. Just do what you want to do, and then I guarantee you, it'll lead you in places you have no clue. And I think, you're going to have opportunities. You all are going to have even more exciting opportunities through technology and all those things. But I think looking back for me, if I had to say what made sense for me, was I sought out careers where I could really work with people to people. And now it sort of makes sense. It feels right to me. So kind of a personal answer to your question. So.
Yeah, so it's not just about technical skills. Again, this is the point that we're trying to emphasize.
There's the theme, yeah.
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 I think someone else was trying to ask a question here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Yes, hi.
So, We know that technology in modern days already has developed over time, of course, and I want to specifically talk about the AI in today's world. So AI also becoming more, developed and more powerful. How do we think that it would replace most of the human skills or jobs maybe in the coming days? And we know that humans have a unique way of thinking and understanding stuff. And how we see that there's a core skills over there that is critical thinking. How do we train those skills? You know that AI cannot think the same as human does. It has his own polar patterns. And I'm just saying, how can we implement it on our lives, and how can we train and really improve our critical thinkings as maybe it's important as for leaderships. That's it.
Wow. So I think, what I would say to you is AI can never ever replace what's in your head, right? So like, I think, no matter how sophisticated AI can be and how it will be, the power of our conscience and our mental capacity is far exceeds, right, the AI models. And no matter how smart they're getting and how they're evolving, look, I'm no expert, right? I'm no technological expert on AI or whatever, but I do think that there's a reason that these skills still exist, right? Like there's still an importance on why the biggest companies in the world who can pay billions of dollars for AI are still looking for people who are creative thinkers, who are leaders, who are motivated and self-aware, because these are skills that no AI, no computer, no technology can mimic, right? Human emotion is something that's unique to what we are as human, right? And so with that in mind, I think, what I would encourage you is, and this is very different. When I was sitting where you are as a college student, I didn't have AI, right? I just had computers at the time, right? So, but, the questions that I asked were the same, right? Technology was still big, it's still developing, right? Technology is something that's always evolving. And so what I would say to you is, think about your relationship as a human to AI, right? Think about how is AI gonna help in whatever it is you do to do better, right? So what does that look like, right? So for example, you think about medicine, right? And so let's say you're interested in becoming a doctor, right? By the time you become a doctor, from now until when you're done, AI is gonna be doing things, right? Like if you're a surgeon, already AI is helping surgeons kind of do their thing, right? In the operating room, it's fascinating, right? So what you have to do is, it's gonna be too much for you to try and predict, oh, I need to learn the right AI so that I can be an effective surgeon, because you don't know how it's gonna develop in the next 5-10 years. But what you can do is become an effective surgeon to ask the right questions, to then know how to adapt the AI when you're ready to be a surgeon. Does that make sense? So it's like predicting, it's like you're using your brain to predict and to be able to adapt to the technology that's going to be available to you. Does that make sense? So it's like you're using the human skills that are in that quadrant so that you're going to beat AI when you get there to be able to use it for you, because you can't predict. Because if you master, this goes for everybody in this room, you could master the AI that there is today, and by Wednesday of next week, it's going to be completely different, right? So don't waste your time trying to figure out how to use AI in this way and that way, because it's always going to change. But what you can do is learn your field, learn your passion, and make sure you have the skills to be able to ask it the right questions when you're able to use it. Does that make sense? So that's at least how I think.
One of the greatest things that my mother told me actually is to try not to control what you can't.
Right, exactly.
And AI and technology is something adjacent to that.
Yes.
We don't know, like you said, like this Wednesday, ChatGPT might just be very different from
it's going to be different, right?
Yeah. Anybody else have good questions?
It doesn't have to be so serious. It could be anything. It doesn't even have to be about this.
Of course. This is a very open discussion. doesn't have to be about core skills. And we still have time for open discussions.
Okay, thank you for. Okay, well, I actually want to add something that relate with your answer that you said that we always need to read every day. And thankfully, I did that. Every time I had my free time, I always going to read. But most of the time, I always read something that relate to women's rights or feminism. And I'm kind of curious. Do you have any suggestions with maybe book recommendation or maybe one of the things that I need to read or the book that changed your life?
Oh boy, wow.
Kind of suggestion. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Ooh, a book that changed my life. Let me think here. What book changed my life? Oh gosh. I'm gonna say book that changed my life. Let me think here. Gosh, I read too much. So let me think. Let's see. God, this is a hard question. Okay, I'm gonna say, what book changed my life?
Turns out reading too much has its own minuses.
And, okay, you know what? So so it's actually a nonfiction book. So I read a lot of nonfiction. And so when I was in college, I read Plato's Republic, you know, Plato, the Greek philosopher, Plato. And so that changed my life because it was really eye-opening to me to think about like how thousands of years ago, people were asking some of the same questions of things that we face today, right? And so this is one of the things why I love reading nonfiction. You know, another book that changed my life was, I like a lot of biographies, you know, and autobiographies. And so I remember reading a biography about Mozart too. I grew up playing the violin too, you know, and so reading about people's lives, like I love reading about like kind of famous people that are like great at a skill and what was their life like, right? And so like throughout all these like Plato and Mozart, like I find kind of like people like that are like different but like ahead of their time. I find that fascinating. And so it changed my life because I was like, you know, it doesn't matter like, you know, where you come from or what you do or what, you know, but like whether you were 2,000 years ago living in Athens or like, you know, you were growing up in 1745 in Salzburg or Austria with Mozart, like you could just come from nowhere and like be absolutely brilliant if you just like hone your craft. So those books changed my life. I don't know, I mean, kind of nerdy, but you know.
Nothing wrong with being nerdy.
Yeah, I like people's stories, you know. That's the kind of books that I like. You like reading women's issues. I like reading about people, you know, and like what made them who they are. I find that fascinating. So yeah.
A very people person from the beginning.
I guess so.
Even in their career.
Yeah.
Right? So Q&A is still open. If anybody still has a question. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. This is the boss himself.
Oh boy, I should be scared for this question. Yes.
Okay, so related to book, I've read a book called The Range by David Epstein. So the book discuss or teach us about the generalist versus specialist.
Oh.
Get it? So
Generalist and specialist,
us
yeah.
as a Gen Z, do you think we must become a generalist or specialist? I think it's debatable for me. So
Yeah.
I need your opinion. Thank you.
So before I give mine, what's your opinion?
Okay, my opinion, we must become a specialist. Like we have to master a certain of skill. For example, public speaking, and then maybe AI nowadays, and camera maybe something that we love actually. But I need your point of view. Yes.
It's not that mine is right or wrong. Here's what I say. Here's what I think. now is you got the young perspective, now you're gonna get the old person perspective. My perspective is you are all specialists now. You're specialists now because you're learning, you're synthesizing and you're learning what it is you want to do and what it is you're studying. That's specialized, right? That's a concentrated, like, you know, some of you are in international relations, some of you are in, I don't know, biology, pharmacy, chemistry, whatever. That's specialized, right? And you need that. You do need that. So I say, the way I see it is, you grow up as a specialist, but then you flourish as a generalist. Because I can tell you from the world of work, at least my work, whether I was looking at my LinkedIn profile, whether I was a management consultant or working in finance or being a diplomat, I have to be able to generalize my specialized knowledge. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, if you could be so good at what you do, but if you can't relate it to somebody else, what's the point, right? So, you know, so that's what I say. So focus now on being a specialist. And then when you convince somebody to give you a job, flip the switch and turn into a generalist.
Yeah, both sides are very important.
Yeah.
We should not ignore one for the other.
Yep.
Q&A still open again. Once more. Does anybody? Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So, critical thinking is often mentioned as one of the most essential skills for the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in your opinion, can critical thinking truly be taught in formal education, or is it mainly developed through real-life experience? How can students actively train this skill in their daily academic life also?
Ooh, okay. So I think critical thinking, that is true. It can't be taught, but you're taught to question things, right? So when you learn things, like when you're learning your subjects, look at it from different perspectives, right? Another way I think that's available to you all in the stage where you are now is group projects. I don't know if you have a lot of group projects in your courses and your field work, but like those are opportunities. Those can be some of the toughest assignments, right? I still remember, I don't remember much about like a lot of my education, but I do remember the times. I remember those annoying students I had to work with, and I remember like people in group projects that I was like, come on, like, you know, you're so lazy, I'm carrying all the work here. So like, you know, and I'm sure that's a daily life for all of you, you know? So like, those are opportunities where you can actually think critically about, you know, you're bringing together, like, let's say you have 4 or 5 different peers that you're working on a group project, and you're like, how are we gonna figure this out? That's critical thinking, right? Working with other students, working on a common problem, right? And I think, you know, critical thinking, you know, I think it's, you know, in some of your humanities subjects, right? That may not be as prevalent maybe in this part of the world, but like, you know, in some of your subjects like history and social sciences, for example, it offers you that perspective of like, you know, if you look at history through the lens of something else, right? That's critical thinking, right? Or even in your STEM, your STEM courses and those kinds of things, like thinking about things. I think it's all about perspectives with critical thinking, and so you want to think about things from a different perspective and think about it from a different angle. And I think those are ways that that you can critically think, kind of like in the here and now. So these are good questions. Yeah.
Of course. Well,
Yeah.
thinking is like a must for everyone.
It's a must.
Yeah.
It's a must.
Q&A is still open. For anybody that still has a question, please just raise your hand as per usual. Since you've run out.
Okay.
That's a lot of questions. Well,
That was a lot of questions. That was very good.
I was like, what, 50 minutes.
50
probably,
minutes.
Right,
Mhm.
full of questions. So before we end this session,
Yes.
I would like to give the media team the floor.
Sure.
Because we will take a picture together.
Okay.
With everyone included. So again, the media team, time and place is yours. Do we go to the front or should we?
Or should we just sit here and then do a, oh, huh? should I just sit there?
Oh, okay. So Anup, let's sit over there.
Okay, sit over here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay.
Okay, everybody please look at the camera. On my count, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3. Okay, maybe another pose. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I would roll.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Again, I want to thank Anup very much for being here and talking with us,
Thank you.
especially answering our questions, our fans' questions from the start to the end. And of course, thank you for all the audience that has attended here. The event does not end here. Of course, after this, you may speak to Anup yourself, ask personal questions, or even talk about the previous discussions that we had. It's up to you if you want to take pictures, you want to take discussions. Of course, we are very open for that, so please, that's all from us. So
Great.
again, once
Thank
more,
you.
give a round of applause for
Thank
Anup
you.
Mahajan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being here. And that's all from me. Thank you very much. See you next time.